All right, in this next section, we are going to graph on the graphing calculator, and on that we are going to find the zeros, the minimums, maximums, as well as discuss the domain and range. So take a second, I want you to pause the video. I want you to copy these three problems down, and these are the equations that we are going to be typing in. And for each equation, we're going to fill in this information. So we are going to decide what the zeros are. Those are going to be in the form of x equals. We're going to decide if there is a minimum. Those are going to be in the form of points. If there are any maximums, again in the form of points. We're going to stay what the domain is and what the range is in interval notation. All right, so first equation, hopefully we have it written down. I'll get my screen adjusted here. All right, so in the y equals, so we're going to clear what's there, and then we're going to type in our new equation. So we have x cubed plus 4x squared minus 5x. Starting in a standard window, so zoom 6. All right, so I can't see my graph up here, so that means that I'm going to adjust my window. So we're going to press the window key. Since we can't see it at the top, that means that we need to change the y maximum to be something bigger. So I'm going to try 30, and I'm going to change the scale to be 2. And then I'm going to press the graph key. Okay, so looking at this, we have 3 zeros, 2 turning points, 1 max, 1 minimum. So we're just going to fill in that list. And the order that you find stuff in doesn't matter. So as we're going through this on our calculator, since we are going to be moving our cursor around, it's always the easiest to find things from left to right. So I'm going to start by finding this 0 down here. So to do that, I'm going to go to second and then trace. So that'll get us into the calc menu. We're trying to find a 0, so that's what I'm going to select on the calculator. Okay. And then it's asking for a left bound. So I'm going to move my cursor so that I'm on the left side of that 0. So in this case, that means that I need to be below it. Okay, so here's my cursor. So I'm going to press enter, and we should see that little arrow pop up. And then now it's asking for a right bound. So I'm going to arrow over so that I'm on the right side of the 0. So that means being above the axis in this case. Press enter. So again, notice how the second arrow popped up. And then we just press enter whenever it says guess. Okay. So our first answer for the 0 is going to be x equals -5. So on our piece of paper, we're going to record this number. All right, then I'm going to calculate the next thing. So up here is the maximum. So we're going to go back to the calc menu, select. So second trace. We're trying to find a maximum, so that's the one that I'm going to select. So the fourth option, enter. Okay, so again, it's asking for the left bound. So I need to be on the left side. So somewhere in this area, so the left side of that maximum, I'm going to press enter. I'm going to arrow over so that we're on the right side for the right bound. Enter. Enter one more time when it says guess. And then we're going to round to 1 decimal place. And again, we're going to write the entire point. So for this maximum, it is -3.2, comma, 24.2. All right, next thing that I'm going to find is this 0 down here. So back to the calc menu, second trace. Select 0, so the second option, enter. And then again, we have to start on the left side of it. So this time we're going to stay above the x-axis. So somewhere in that area, enter. And then arrow so that we're just below the x-axis. So our y value has to be negative. And then enter, enter when it says guess. So our second 0 is 0. So again, I'm just recording that on my piece of paper. All right, looking at my next thing. So we have to find the minimum down here. So again, second trace, selecting minimum, because that's what we're trying to find, enter. So I'm already on the left side of it, so I'm just going to press enter. I'm going to arrow over so that I'm on the right side of it, enter. Enter when it says guess. Again, rounding to 1 decimal place. So it's going to be 0.5, comma, negative 1.4 as an ordered pair. And we have one thing left to figure out, that is the 0 right here. So second trace, select 0. So again, we want to be just below the x-axis for the left side, enter. Then above for the right side, enter. Enter when it says guess. So our last 0 is a positive 1. And while we still have the picture up, if we talk about domain. So remember that domain is the x values. So as we're looking at this graph is going to continue to go right forever. It's going to continue to go to the left forever. So since there's no breaks in this graph, the domain is going to be all real numbers. Range is our possible y values. So again, as I'm looking at this graph up here is going to keep going up forever, and it's going to keep going down forever. So since there are no breaks, the range for this is going to be all real numbers. So anytime we are dealing with an odd function, because it starts and ends in two different places, the domain and range will always be all real numbers for both. Okay, so anytime we have an odd function, domain and range, without even knowing what the graph looks like, if it's a polynomial function with an odd degree, it's going to be all reals for both. All right, so again, final summarized answers are going to look like this. So we listed out our zeros, our minimum point, maximum point, domain, and range. So we're going to go through and do the same thing for the second problem. So again, we're going to figure out the zeros, the min value, the max value, domain, and range. So again, we're just going to fill in that information. So on the calculator, we're going to go to y equals, clear what's there, type in our new equation. So we have x to the fourth, x to the fourth, there we go, plus x cubed minus 3x squared minus 5x minus 2. So I'm going to go back to a standard window, so zoom 6. All right, so looking at this, we're going to have two zeros, so here and here. There is no turning point here. Okay, there's no turning point, so that means that we only have one, and it's going to be a minimum down at the bottom. So since we only have that one turning point and it's a minimum, for the maximum we can just put none right away. And then we're going to go through and find everything else. So I'm going to start with the 0 right here. So second trace, select 0, and then we need to be on the left side of it. So enter to the right side. So again, make sure that your y value is negative before you press enter. So enter, and then enter when it says guess. So our first 0 is going to be negative 1 if we're rounding to the nearest 10th spot. All right, next thing we're going to find is that minimum. So second trace, we're selecting minimum because that's what we're trying to find. And then again, we want to be on the left side of it. Oops, so somewhere in this area. So enter, and then to the right side of it. So somewhere in this area, enter, and then enter when it says guess. So the minimum is going to be 1.3, comma, negative 8.5. And then the last 0 that we need to find is right here. And it looks like it might be at 2, so I'm going to press trace, and then I'm going to click the 2 key, and then enter. And since I got 0 for y, that is my second 0. So I don't need to worry about going left bound, right bound stuff. So sometimes it helps to use a little bit of a common sense and to maybe do a little bit of guess and check first. And then the domain for this, so again, it's going to go right forever, left forever. So all reals for our domain. And then our range, so if we get off the trace here, it's turning around and going back up here. So we're not going to have any y values down here. So that means that we're going to go from whatever this y value is all the way up to positive infinity. And remember, that was -8, and we got that from the y value of our minimum. So we're going to have a bracket, -8.5. And again, this is an approximation. It's not an exact number. So just keep that in mind. And then comma all the way up to positive infinity with a parenthesis. So that is what our answer should look like for problem 2. All right, one more example. Okay, so here it is, filling in the same things. So again, we're going to find the real zeros, any minimum points, maximum points, and the domain and range. So again, looking at this, I know because this is an even degree, domain has to be all real numbers without even looking at the graph. And there's a reflection. So when we graph it, our graph should be opening down. So that means for our range, it's going to have to come from -infinity, and it's going to go up to wherever our highest maximum point is. So without even knowing what the graph looks like, I know what that domain and range is going to be. Okay. All right, so now let's look at the graph just to verify all that and to find the rest of our information. So back to y equals, typing in our new equation, so I'm going to clear what's there. -4, x to the 4th, plus 5x cubed, plus 2x squared, plus 3x, plus 1. Okay, and then zoom 6. All right, we don't need to worry about adjusting our graph. Looking at this, I'm going to have 2 zeros here and here, and I'm going to have a maximum. So this time we do not have a minimum, so I'm just going to put none for that one. All right, I'm going to start by finding that 0. It looks like it might be at 0, so I'm going to just double check real quick. So trace 0, enter. Okay, and I didn't get 0 here, so it's not. So we need to actually calculate it this time. So second trace, select 0. So left side, so below the axis, enter. And then right side is above, so enter when it says yes. All right, so our first 0, again rounding to the nearest 10th, is going to be -0.3. And then now I'm going to find this maximum point up here. So second trace, we are finding a maximum, so the 4th option, starting on the left side of it, so somewhere in this area, enter, and then to the right side of it, oops, too far. So somewhere in there, enter, and then enter again. So our maximum is going to be at 1.3, comma, 7.9. So that's the number that we're going to add into our range. So again, the range is going to go from -infinity up to 7.9. Bracket on the negative, or excuse me, parenthesis on the -infinity, bracket on the 7.9. And then we just need to find this last 0. So second trace, select 0. We want to stay above for the left side, below for the right side. Enter when it says guess. So again, looking at this, anytime we have e to a negative number, that's just talking about scientific notation. So it's asking us to move our decimal 12 places to the left. So if we round, this is still 0. And then our x value, which is what we need, is 1.8 if we round to the nearest 10th. So again, here is our filled in information for that last problem. And that will also conclude section 4, analyzing graphs.